The rain had not fallen in Umuaka village for almost 3 months. The red earth had become dry and cracked, and every morning the elders gathered beneath the ancient Iroko tree to whisper about angry spirits and forgotten traditions. Women walked farther each day to fetch water from the stream, while farmers stared helplessly at dying crops beneath the burning Nigerian sun. But the drought was not the only thing troubling the village. There was also Amara. At 22, Amara was known throughout Umuaka for a beauty that seemed almost unreal. Her skin glowed like polished bronze beneath sunlight, and her eyes carried a quiet sadness that made people stare whenever she passed through the marketplace. The old women often said she was born with the face of a queen. But beauty in Umuaka came with expectations. Her father, Chief Okeke, was one of the wealthiest men in the region. He owned lands stretching beyond the palm forest, and people bowed their heads whenever his black SUV passed through the dusty village roads. Chief Okeke had already chosen the man Amara would marry. His name was Obinna. Obinna was rich, powerful, and feared. He was nearly twice Amara's age, but in the eyes of the village elders, that did not matter. What mattered was status, respect, and the union between two influential families. The wedding was only 4 weeks away. And Amara hated every moment of it. You should be grateful, her mother reminded her constantly. Many girls pray for this kind of life. But Amara did not want a life built like a golden cage. She wanted freedom. Every evening, she escaped to the river at the edge of the village, where the air felt cooler and the sound of flowing water drowned the noise inside her mind. That was where she first saw him. His name was Chinedu. He stood knee-deep in the river, repairing a broken fishing net beneath the fading orange sky. His white shirt was rolled to his elbows, revealing strong arms hardened by years of labor. Unlike the wealthy men in Umuaka, Chinedu carried no gold chains, no expensive watches, no bodyguards. Yet something about him felt powerful. Amara tried to walk past quietly, but her sandal slipped against a wet stone. Before she could fall, Chinedu caught her arm. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world itself seemed to pause. You should be careful, he said softly. His voice was calm, deep, and strangely comforting. Amara quickly pulled away, embarrassed. Thank you, she whispered. Chinedu nodded politely, but his eyes lingered on her face with recognition. Everyone in Umuaka knew Chief Okeke's daughter. You are Amara, he said carefully. She hesitated before answering. Yes. A strange silence settled between them as river water moved gently around the rocks. Most villagers treated Amara like royalty. They either feared her father or hoped to gain something from him. But Chinedu looked at her differently. Not with fear. Not with greed. Just honesty. You come here often? He asked. Amara looked toward the river. Only when I want peace. Chinedu smiled faintly. Then we are searching for the same thing. That sentence stayed in her mind long after she returned home. The next evening, she found herself returning to the river again. And Chinedu was there. Then the evening after that. And the one after that. Days slowly became conversations. Conversations became laughter. And laughter became something far more dangerous. Chinedu told her stories about Lagos, where he had once worked as a mechanic before returning to Umuaka after his father's death. He spoke about dreams larger than the village and a future built through hard work rather than family names. Amara listened to him in ways she had never listened to anyone before. With him, she did not feel like Chief Okeke's daughter. She simply felt alive. One evening, as fireflies danced above the riverbank, Chinedu finally asked the question that had been haunting both of them. Why are you marrying Obinna? Amora's smile disappeared instantly. I do not have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not in Umuaka. Chinedu looked away, jaw tightening. You deserve better. Her heart beat faster. Nobody had ever spoken to her like that before. Not even once. Over the following weeks, whispers slowly began spreading through the village. People noticed Amara disappearing every evening. An old woman fetching water claimed she had seen Chief Okeke's daughter sitting beside a poor fisherman near the river. At first, nobody believed it. But villages survive on gossip the same way fire survives on dry grass. Soon, everyone was talking. One afternoon, as Amara walked through the marketplace, conversation suddenly stopped around her. Women exchanged looks. Men shook their heads quietly. Fear crept into her chest. By sunset, the rumors had finally reached Obinna. And Obinna was not a patient man. That night, thunder roared across the dark sky as his black SUV stopped violently outside Chief Okeke's mansion. Villagers watched from their windows as Obinna stormed inside like an approaching war. Amara stood frozen in the living room while her father's face darkened with rage. "Tell me it is not true," Chief Okeke demanded. Her hands trembled. But something inside her had changed since meeting Chinedu. For the first time in her life, fear no longer controlled her completely. "It is true," she said quietly. The room exploded into chaos. Her mother gasped. Obinna slammed his fist against the table. Chief Okeke stared at his daughter as though she had betrayed generations of family honor. "A fisherman?" Obinna spat angrily. "You disgrace yourself for a poor nobody." Amara lifted her head slowly. "He is worth more than every rich man in this village." The slap came so fast she barely saw it. Pain burned across her cheek as silence filled the room. Chief Okeke's breathing became heavy with fury. "You will never see that boy again." Amora's eyes filled with tears, but she refused to lower her gaze. Outside, rain finally began falling over Umuaka village for the first time in months. But inside the house, a storm far more dangerous had already begun. And somewhere near the river, Chinedu had no idea that powerful men were already planning to destroy him. Rain poured heavily across Umuaka village through the entire night. The dry earth that had begged for water now drowned beneath muddy floods, while thunder shook the roofs of small homes like angry drums from the sky. Villagers whispered that the sudden rainfall was no ordinary blessing. Some believed the ancestors were speaking. Others believed trouble had finally arrived. Inside Chief Okeke's mansion, Amara sat alone in her room, staring silently at her reflection in the mirror. The faint mark of her father's slap still burned against her cheek. But the pain inside her heart felt worse. For the first time in her life, she had spoken against her father publicly. In Umuaka, daughters did not challenge men like Chief Okeke. They obeyed quietly, married respectfully, and protected family honor no matter the cost. Amara had broken every rule. And now the entire village knew it. A soft knock came at her door before her mother entered carefully, carrying a lantern. "Your father is angry," her mother whispered. Amara looked away. "He has always been angry. Not like this." Her mother placed the lantern down slowly and sat beside her. "You do not understand the danger of what you are doing." Amara's voice trembled. "I love him." The older woman closed her eyes painfully. Love does not feed families. Love does not protect names. Love does not survive in villages like this. But should fear decide my future? Her mother remained silent for several seconds. Then quietly, almost sadly, she replied, "In Umuaka, it always has." Meanwhile, across the village, Chinedu sat inside his small wooden house near the river, unaware that his life was already changing. The storm outside rattled his windows while his younger sister, Ifeoma, prepared food over a small fire. "You should stop seeing her," she warned softly. Chinedu looked up sharply. "So now the whole village knows." Ifeoma nodded nervously. "People are talking everywhere. Obinna's friends were at the marketplace today. They were asking questions about you." Chinedu's expression hardened. He knew men like Obinna. Powerful men rarely forgave humiliation. Especially not humiliation caused by a poor fisherman. But despite the danger, one thought continued echoing inside his mind. Amora. The way she smiled beside the river. The sadness hidden behind her beautiful eyes. The quiet courage she carried despite living beneath her father's control. For the first time in years, Chinedu felt something stronger than survival. Hope. And hope was dangerous. The following morning, Umuaka village woke beneath dark grey skies and endless gossip. Women selling fruit paused conversations whenever Amora walked past. Children whispered her name. Even the elders beneath the Iroko tree shook their heads in disappointment. By afternoon, the story had already spread beyond Umuaka into neighboring villages. Chief Okeke's daughter had fallen in love with a poor fisherman. To many, it sounded almost insulting. To others, it sounded romantic. But to Chief Okeke, it sounded like war. Inside his large sitting room, Obinna sat quietly drinking palm wine while two local elders listened carefully. "We must stop this before the wedding," Obinna said coldly. Chief Okeke's jaw tightened. "The girl is confused." "No," Obinna replied sharply. "She is disobedient." The room became silent. One elder cleared his throat carefully. "Perhaps the fisherman should be warned." Obinna smiled darkly. "Oh, he will be warned." That evening, as the sun disappeared behind thick clouds, Chinedu returned from the river carrying fishing nets across his shoulder. But something felt wrong immediately. The village streets were unusually quiet. People avoided eye contact. An old man standing near a roadside shop shook his head sadly as Chinedu passed. Then Chinedu saw them. 3 black SUVs parked outside his house. His footsteps slowed instantly. Obinna's men. Fear crept into his stomach, but he forced himself to continue walking. The moment he approached the compound, one of the men stepped forward. Tall. Broad shoulders. Scar across his face. "You are Chinedu?" the man asked. "Yes." Without warning, the man punched him violently across the jaw. Chinedu crashed onto the wet ground as pain exploded through his face. Ifeoma screamed from inside the house. Before Chinedu could stand again, another man grabbed his shirt and slammed him against the wall. "You think you can embarrass Chief Okeke?" the scar-faced man growled. Blood dripped from Chinedu's lip, but he refused to beg. "I love her." The men laughed cruelly. "Love," one mocked. "Poor men always speak about love when they cannot offer anything else." Another punch landed against Chinedu's ribs. Then another. And another. Villagers watched secretly from windows, but nobody interfered. No one challenged powerful men in Umuaka. Finally, the scar-faced man leaned close to Chinedu's bleeding face. "You will stay away from Amora," he warned quietly. "If we see you near her again, next time we bury you." The SUVs disappeared into the rain moments later, leaving Chinedu collapsed in mud outside his home. Ifeoma rushed toward him crying. But even through the pain, Chinedu thought about only one thing. Amora. At that same moment, Amora stood near her bedroom window inside her father's mansion, watching lightning flash across the village sky. Something inside her suddenly felt wrong. Deeply wrong. Then her phone vibrated. A hidden message. From Chinedu. "They came for me." Her heart stopped. Within seconds, she grabbed a shawl and rushed toward the back entrance of the mansion. But before she could escape, her father's voice thundered behind her. "Where do you think you are going?" Amora froze. Chief Okeke stood in the hallway surrounded by 2 guards, his expression colder than she had ever seen before. "You had him beaten," she whispered in horror. "He should be grateful that is all I allowed." Tears filled Amora's eyes. "You cannot control who I love." Chief Okeke stepped closer slowly. "You speak like a child who does not understand the world." "No," Amora replied shakily. "I finally understand it." For a brief moment, silence hung heavily between them. Then Chief Okeke delivered the words that shattered her completely. "If you continue seeing that boy, I will destroy him." Amora's breathing became uneven. "You would kill him?" Chief Okeke said nothing. And that silence terrified her more than any answer could. Late that night, while most of Umuoka slept beneath heavy rain, Amora secretly escaped through her bedroom window. Barefoot and trembling, she ran through muddy village paths toward the river. Toward Chinedu. Toward the only person who made her feel free. When she finally reached his small house, she found him sitting outside alone beneath the storm, blood still visible across his bruised face. The moment he saw her, he stood painfully. "Why did you come?" he asked softly. Amora's eyes filled with tears. "Because I cannot lose you." Thunder roared above them as she touched his wounded face carefully. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Chinedu whispered the words that would change everything. "Leave this village with me." Amora looked into his eyes as rain poured around them. And for the first time in her life, she seriously considered it. The rain finally stopped just before dawn. A heavy silence settled over Umuoka village as mist floated above the river and roosters cried from distant compounds. The muddy roads glistened beneath the pale morning light, but inside Amora's heart, chaos still raged like a storm. "Leave this village with me." Chinedu's words echoed endlessly in her mind. She had barely slept after returning secretly to her father's mansion before sunrise. Every time she closed her eyes, she imagined two futures standing before her. One future was safe, rich, respected. A life beside Obinna inside luxurious houses, expensive cars, and endless control. The other future was uncertain, dangerous, and filled with struggle. But it also contained something she had never truly felt before. Love. Amora sat quietly at the edge of her bed while early sunlight crept through her curtains. Downstairs, servants moved around preparing breakfast as though nothing had changed. But everything had changed. A knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she whispered. Her mother entered slowly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then her mother noticed the mud stains still visible near Amora's sandals. Instantly, fear crossed her face. "You went to see him again?" Amora remained silent. Her mother closed the door quickly and lowered her voice. "Have you lost your mind? He was hurt because of me. And he will be hurt again if this continues." Amora stood up sharply. "So I should abandon him? Pretend I do not care? You should survive." The words landed heavily between them. Amora stared at her mother carefully for the first time in years. There was no cruelty in her eyes. Only exhaustion. The exhaustion of a woman who had spent her entire life obeying powerful men. "Did you ever love father?" Amora asked quietly. Her mother froze. A painful silence followed. Then she answered softly. "It did not matter whether I loved him." That sentence broke something inside Amora. Because suddenly, she saw her future clearly. Not as a wife. Not as a queen beside Obinna. But as another trapped woman slowly losing herself year after year. "No," Amora whispered firmly. "I will not live like that." Meanwhile, across Umuoka village, danger was already growing. Inside a small drinking bar near the marketplace, Obinna sat with several men discussing Chinedu. "He is stubborn," one man muttered. Obinna drank slowly from his glass without emotion. "Then we make him afraid." Another man leaned forward carefully. "People are beginning to talk. Some villagers support the boy." Obinna's expression darkened instantly. "Then they are forgetting who controls this village." He placed his drink down hard. "The wedding will happen in 2 weeks. And if the girl refuses?" someone asked nervously. Obinna smiled coldly. "She will not refuse." But deep inside, even Obinna sensed the truth. Amora was slipping beyond his control. And powerful men feared losing control more than anything else. That evening, Amora returned secretly to the river. The orange sunset reflected across the water while birds circled above distant palm trees. Chinedu waited beneath the large mango tree where they first spoke weeks earlier. The bruises on his face had darkened, but his eyes softened immediately when he saw her. "You came." Amora nodded. For several seconds they simply stood there looking at each other as wind moved gently through the trees. Then Chinedu stepped closer. "I meant what I said last night." Amora's heart raced. "You really want to leave Umuoka?" "Yes." "Where would we go?" "Lagos." The word itself sounded enormous. Lagos. A city larger than anything Amora had ever known. A place crowded with millions of strangers, endless traffic, bright lights, music, opportunity, and danger. Far away from village traditions. Far away from Chief Okeke. Far away from Obina. "We could start over there," Chinedu said softly. "Nobody would control us." Amora looked down at the river quietly. The idea terrified her. But strangely, it also felt like freedom. "What if they find us?" she whispered. Chinedu gently held her hand. "Then we keep running." For the first time in her life, Amora laughed through tears. "You make impossible things sound easy." "No," Chinedu replied. "I just know some things are worth risking everything for." The world around them suddenly felt smaller. Closer. As though nothing existed beyond the sound of flowing water and their heartbeat. Slowly, carefully, Chinedu touched her face. And then he kissed her. Softly at first. Then deeply. Passionately. A kiss filled with fear, hope, longing, and rebellion. But neither of them noticed the figure watching silently from across the river. A young boy carrying firewood. By nightfall, the entire village knew. Again. The gossip spread faster than wildfire. They kissed beside the river. They are planning something. Chief Okeke will never allow this. Inside his mansion, Chief Okeke's fury exploded like thunder. He smashed a glass against the wall while servants lowered their heads in fear. She humiliates this family again and again. Obina stood nearby, unusually calm. Too calm. "What do you plan to do?" Chief Okeke demanded. Obina adjusted his expensive wristwatch slowly. "I will end it." The coldness in his voice silenced the room instantly. Even Chief Okeke looked disturbed. "You must be careful," one elder warned nervously. "If anything happens to the boy, villagers may talk." Obina's eyes turned dark. "Then we make his disappearance look like an accident." At that exact moment, far from the mansion, Amora sat beside Chinedu outside his small home while Ifeoma prepared food indoors. The atmosphere felt peaceful for the first time in weeks. Almost too peaceful. "I spoke to a friend in Lagos," Chinedu said quietly. "He can help us find a place to stay." Amora smiled faintly. "You planned this already?" "I started planning the day I realized I could not live without you." Her cheeks warmed softly. Then suddenly, a loud engine roared nearby. Chinedu's expression changed instantly. 3 black SUVs appeared at the far end of the road. Obina's vehicles. Fear shot through Amora's chest. "They found us," she whispered. The SUV stopped violently outside the compound as armed men stepped out. This time they carried more than fists. Chinedu grabbed Amora's hand immediately. "Run!" Without hesitation, they sprinted toward the back of the house as shouting erupted behind them. "Stop them!" Gunshots exploded into the night sky. Villagers screamed. Dogs barked wildly. Amora's heartbeat pounded painfully as she and Chinedu ran through dark forest paths behind the village. Branches tore against her skin while muddy water splashed beneath their feet. Behind them, flashlight beams moved rapidly through the darkness. "They are gaining on us." Amara cried. Chinedu tightened his grip on her hand. Do not stop running. Another gunshot echoed frighteningly close. Then suddenly, Amara slipped. She crashed hard against the muddy ground with a cry of pain. Chinedu turned instantly. Amara. Her ankle twisted painfully beneath her body. I cannot stand, she gasped. The flashlight beams were getting closer. Voices shouting. Branches snapping. Time was running out. Chinedu looked desperately around the forest. Then his eyes locked onto an abandoned hut partially hidden between thick trees. Without another word, he lifted Amara into his arms and carried her toward it as the sounds of Obino's men closed in behind them. And somewhere deep within the darkness of Umuoka forest, someone else was already waiting. The forest felt alive at night. Wind whispered through tall trees while insects chirped endlessly beneath the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, thunder roared softly again, though no rain had yet fallen. Chinedu carried Amara carefully through the thick bushes, his breathing heavy from exhaustion. Behind them, flashlight beams still moved between the trees. Obino's men were hunting them. Hurry, Amara whispered painfully. Her ankle burned with every movement, but fear had far worse. The abandoned hut stood ahead like a shadow hidden beneath twisted branches and overgrown vines. Its roof looked broken with age, and half the wooden walls leaned dangerously sideways. But right now, it was their only hope. Chinedu pushed the old door open carefully and stepped inside. Darkness swallowed them instantly. The air smelled of dust, wet wood, and something older, something forgotten. Amara trembled as Chinedu gently placed her down near the corner of the hut. Outside, voices echoed closer. They came this way. Search everywhere. Flashlights sliced through the forest like knives. Amara grabbed Chinedu's hand tightly. They will find us. No, he whispered. Stay quiet. For several terrifying seconds, footsteps moved closer toward the hut. Closer. Closer. Then suddenly, a strange sound echoed outside. A low whistle. The voices stopped immediately. What was that? One man asked nervously. Another voice answered quietly. This forest is cursed. Even through the fear, Chinedu frowned slightly. Everyone in Umuoka knew the stories about this forest. Villagers believed spirits live deep within it. Children were warned never to wander here after sunset, and hunters avoided certain areas completely. Most people thought the stories were nonsense. But fear has power in villages like Umuoka. Another whistle echoed through the darkness. Longer this time. Stranger. Obino's men suddenly sounded uncertain. We should leave. What if they escaped? We can continue tomorrow. Branches cracked rapidly as the flashlight beam slowly disappeared deeper into the forest. Silence returned again. Amara released a shaky breath. They left. But before Chinedu could answer, a voice emerged from the darkness behind them. You should not trust silence so quickly. Amara screamed softly. Chinedu spun around instantly. An old man stepped slowly from the shadows at the far end of the hut, holding a lantern in one hand and a walking stick in the other. His grey beard looked wild and uneven, while tribal markings covered parts of his weathered face. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the old man sighed. If I wanted to harm you, the men outside would already have your bodies. Chinedu positioned himself protectively in front of Amara. Who are you? The lantern light flickered across the stranger's eyes. People once called me Baba Duru. Amara's expression changed immediately. She had heard that name before. Everyone in Umuoka had. Years ago, Baba Duru was known as one of the village's respected elders before suddenly disappearing into the forest after a terrible conflict with powerful families. Some claimed he became mad. Others believed he practiced forbidden spiritual traditions. And some whispered that Chief Okeke himself helped destroy the old man's life. You know my father, Amora said cautiously. Boba Duru looked at her for several seconds before answering. Yes. The silence that followed felt heavy. Dangerous. Finally, the old man walked toward a small wooden chair and sat down slowly. Young lovers running from powerful men, he muttered. Some stories never truly change. Chinedu still looked suspicious. Why are you helping us? The old man smiled sadly. Because long ago, nobody helped me. The lantern crackled softly while wind pushed against the weak walls outside. Amora studied Boba Duru carefully. There was pain hidden behind his eyes. Old pain. The kind that never completely disappears. You loved someone, she realized quietly. The old man's face hardened slightly. Yes. For the first time since entering the hut, silence became emotional rather than fearful. Boba Duru stared into the lantern flame as though seeing memories from another lifetime. She belonged to a wealthy family, he said softly. I was poor. Her father believed I was beneath her. Amora's chest tightened. The story sounded painfully familiar. What happened? Chinedu asked quietly. Boba Duru closed his eyes briefly. They separated us. The hut became silent again except for the sound of wind outside. Did you ever see her again? Amora whispered. The old man looked away. No. Something inside Amora broke hearing that answer. Because suddenly she saw her own future clearly if they failed. Years of regret. Years of wandering. Years of pain. No. She could not allow that to happen. Not now. Not after finally finding real love. Boba Duru slowly stood again before walking toward a small shelf hidden beneath cloth and old tools. There is little time, he said. Obina will not stop searching. Chinedu nodded grimly. We plan to leave for Lagos. The old man paused thoughtfully. Then you must leave before sunrise. Amora frowned. Why before sunrise? Because once daylight comes, every road leaving Umuoka will belong to Obina. Fear crept back into the room. Boba Duru reached beneath the shelf and pulled out an old folded map. There is another path, he explained quietly. An old road through the forest leading toward the highway. Chinedu stepped closer carefully. You trust us with this? Boba Duru looked directly at Amora. I trust love when it is real. Those words hung deeply in the room. Outside, thunder finally cracked loudly across the sky. Rain began falling once again. Heavy. Violent. As if the heavens themselves were warning them. Amora suddenly winced in pain while touching her ankle. Boba Duru noticed immediately. You cannot travel far with that injury. It will heal, Amora insisted. But even standing seemed difficult. Chinedu's face tightened with worry. We may need to wait until morning. No, Boba Duru interrupted sharply. If you wait, you die here. The bluntness of his words chilled the room. Then suddenly, a loud sound echoed outside. Engines. Multiple engines. Everyone froze. Flashlight beams appeared again through cracks in the wooden walls. This time there were more of them. Far more. Obina had returned. And judging by the voices outside, he had come personally. Rain crashed violently against the roof of the hut as thunder shook the forest around them. Inside, fear spread like fire. Flashlight beams moved between the wooden cracks while engines growled outside one after another. Men shouted through the storm, their voices growing closer every second. Amora's heartbeat pounded painfully. He found us, she whispered. Chinedu's jaw tightened as he carefully moved toward the broken window to look outside. What he saw made his blood run cold. At least 10 men surrounded the forest clearing. Some carried guns. Others held machetes. And standing beside the black SUV at the center of it all was Obinna himself. Even through the heavy rain, his expensive black outfit looked untouched by the mud around him. He stood calmly beneath a large umbrella while one of his men pointed toward the hut. "He knows," Chinedu muttered darkly. Boba Duru immediately lowered the lantern flame. "Young man," he said quietly, "listen carefully to me." Outside, Obinna's voice thundered through the rain. "Chinedu." Silence filled the hut. "You cannot hide forever," Obinna shouted again. Amora trembled beside the wall. The sound of his voice alone carried danger. Boba Duru turned toward the back of the hut and pointed toward a narrow wooden trapdoor hidden beneath old cloth. "There is a tunnel beneath this hut," he whispered. Chinedu stared at him in shock. "A tunnel? Long ago this place was used during village wars. It leads toward the riverbank beyond the forest." Hope flashed briefly across Chinedu's face. But then he looked at Amora's injured ankle. "She can barely walk." Boba Duru's expression hardened. "Then you carry her." Outside, footsteps moved closer. Heavy. Slow. Confident. Obinna was approaching the hut personally now. Amora's breathing became uneven. "Chinedu." He knelt beside her immediately. "Listen to me," he said softly while holding her face carefully. "No matter what happens, I will not leave you behind." Tears filled her eyes instantly. Before she could answer, a violent bang exploded against the hut door. "Open it," one of the men shouted. Another bang followed. The old wooden walls shook dangerously. Boba Duru quickly pulled the trapdoor open, revealing darkness beneath it. "Hurry!" The thud against the door sounded even louder. Wood cracked. Obinna's men were breaking through. Chinedu lifted Amora carefully into his arms despite the pain in his bruised ribs. "You first," Boba Duru ordered. Chinedu climbed down into the narrow underground tunnel while Amora clung tightly to him. The air below smelled damp and ancient. Above them, the hut door finally shattered open. Men stormed inside. Search everywhere. Flashlights moved wildly across the room. Chinedu froze beneath the tunnel entrance while holding Amora against his chest. Footsteps echoed directly above them. One wrong sound. One breath too loud. And everything would end. Then Obinna's voice entered the hut. Cold. Controlled. Dangerous. "So this is where the lovers hide." Silence followed. Chinedu could hear his own heartbeat. Boba Duru spoke calmly above them. "You should leave this place." Obinna laughed softly. "I remember you, old man." A pause. "They said you disappeared into madness. And yet I still survived powerful men." The tension above them felt unbearable. Then suddenly, a flashlight beam swept dangerously close to the trapdoor opening. Amora gasped quietly. Chinedu immediately covered her mouth gently while pulling her deeper into the shadows. Above them, one of the men frowned. "What is this?" For one horrifying second, Chinedu thought they were discovered. But Boba Duru quickly interrupted. "Old storage space. Nothing more." The man hesitated. Then Obinna spoke again. "Bring the girl to me alive." Amora's entire body stiffened hearing those words. Alive. Meaning Chinedu was the real target. Rage burned inside him instantly. But this was not the moment for anger. This was survival. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed above. Then shouting. "What are you doing?" Boba Duru's voice roared unexpectedly. "Run!" Before anyone could react, Chinedu sprinted deeper into the tunnel carrying Amora. Behind them, chaos exploded inside the hut. Men yelling. Furniture breaking. Gunshots erupting violently. Amora screamed softly. "No!" Boba Duru. But Chinedu kept running through the narrow darkness as death fell from the ceiling around them. The tunnel twisted sharply beneath the forest like a hidden snake. Water dripped from the walls while roots pushed through the ancient earth above their heads. Far behind them, muffled shouting continued. Then, a single gunshot echoed louder than all the others. Everything went silent afterward. Amora covered her mouth in horror. Tears streamed down her cheeks. They both knew what that silence probably meant. But there was no time to stop. The tunnel finally opened near the riverbank far beyond the forest clearing. Cold rain poured down as Chinedu emerged into the night carrying Amora against his chest. For a brief moment, both of them breathed heavily beneath the storm. Free. At least for now. But suddenly headlights appeared nearby. A motorcycle approached rapidly through the rain. Chinedu instantly stepped backward protectively. Yet as the rider came closer, Amora recognized the face beneath the hood. Ifeoma. Chinedu stared in shock. His younger sister stopped the motorcycle quickly, breathing hard. I heard gunshots, she said fearfully. The whole village is searching for you. Chinedu looked behind them toward the dark forest. We have to leave now. Ifeoma nodded urgently. There's a transport truck leaving for Lagos before dawn. My friend can hide you inside. Hope returned again. Small. Fragile. But alive. Amora looked at Chinedu through rain-soaked tears. Do you think we can really escape? Before he could answer, a bright flashlight suddenly appeared across the riverbank. Then another. Voices echoed through the darkness. They are here. Obino's men had found the tunnel exit. And this time, they were much closer than before. The flashlight beams cut through the rain like hunting knives. They are here. Voices echoed across the riverbank while Obino's men rushed through the darkness toward them. Chinedu's heart slammed against his chest. There's no time, Ifeoma cried. Get on. The motorcycle engine roared loudly beneath the storm as Chinedu quickly helped Amora climb onto the seat behind Ifeoma. But before he could get on, a gunshot exploded nearby. Mud burst beside his feet. They are shooting. Amora screamed. Go. Chinedu shouted. Ifeoma accelerated instantly, the motorcycle sliding violently across the muddy path as Chinedu jumped onto the back just seconds before more gunshots echoed behind them. Rain whipped against their faces while they sped through the forest road at terrifying speed. Behind them, headlights appeared. Obino's SUVs. They were chasing them. Faster. Chinedu yelled. I'm trying. The narrow road twisted dangerously between trees while muddy water splashed beneath the tires. One wrong turn could throw them into the forest. Amora held Chinedu tightly, her injured ankle throbbing painfully with every bump. For the first time, fear truly overwhelmed her. Not fear of her father. Not fear of gossip. But fear of losing Chinedu forever. The SUVs behind them grew closer. Their headlights illuminated the storm like giant predators hunting prey. Then suddenly, another gunshot. The motorcycle swerved violently. Ifeoma cried out. The tire. The back wheel shook dangerously. We won't make it far, she panicked. Ahead, faint lights finally appeared through the rain. A roadside transport station. Dozens of large trucks lined the muddy highway while exhausted travelers waited beneath weak shelter lights. We are close. Chinedu shouted. The motorcycle barely survived the final stretch before collapsing sideways near the station entrance. All three of them crashed into the mud. Pain shot through Amora's ankle again as Chinedu quickly helped her up. Can you walk? She nodded weakly despite the pain. Behind them, the SUVs were still coming. No more than 2 minutes away. Ifeoma pointed urgently toward a large blue transport truck near the far end of the station. That's the Lagos truck. Without hesitation, they ran. Or at least tried to. Amora limped badly while Chinedu supported most of her weight. Rain poured heavily around them as truck drivers shouted and engines rumbled loudly. The driver of the blue truck frowned when he saw them approaching. "We're full," he said immediately. Chinedu pulled crumpled money from his pocket desperately. "Please. We just need a place to hide." The man hesitated. Then his eyes shifted toward the approaching black SUVs. Instantly, he understood. His expression changed from annoyance to fear. "I do not want trouble." "You will never see us again," Chinedu promised. The driver looked at Amora's injured condition. Then finally sighed. Quickly. He opened the back cargo compartment filled with sacks and wooden crates. "Hide there." Relief flooded through Amora instantly. But before they could climb inside, a terrifying voice echoed across the station. "Amora!" Everyone froze. Obinna had arrived. He stepped out of the SUV slowly beneath the rain, fury burning inside his eyes. Several armed men followed behind him while frightened travelers moved away nervously. For a brief moment, silence swallowed the entire station. Even the rain suddenly felt quieter. Obinna stared directly at Amora. "Come back now," he said coldly. Amora's hands trembled. But this time, she did not step toward him. Instead, she moved closer to Chinedu. Obinna noticed immediately. And something dark changed inside his face. "You would choose him over your family." Amora swallowed hard. "Yes." The word hit like thunder. Even Chinedu looked stunned by the strength in her voice. Obinna laughed softly. But there was no humor in it. "You think this is love?" he asked bitterly. "This boy has nothing." Chinedu stepped forward protectively. "What matters is that she is free." Obinna's eyes turned deadly. "No," he replied quietly. "What matters is power." One of his men suddenly raised a gun toward Chinedu. Travelers screamed. Everything happened at once. "No!" Amora shouted. The gunshot exploded across the station. Chinedu shoved Amora sideways just as the bullet struck him. Time itself seemed to stop. Amora stared in horror as Chinedu collapsed heavily into the mud. Blood spread quickly across his shirt beneath the rain. "Chinedu!" Her scream shattered the night. People began running everywhere in panic while truck horns blasted loudly. Obinna himself looked shocked. He had wanted fear, not chaos. Amora fell beside Chinedu, trembling violently. "No, no, no, no." Chinedu coughed painfully, blood visible near his lips. But somehow, he was still conscious. The bullet had struck near his shoulder, not his heart. "You have to go," he whispered weakly. Tears mixed with rain across Amora's face. "I'm not leaving you." "You must." Obinna's men were already regrouping nearby. More guns. More danger. Ifeoma grabbed Amora desperately. "If we stay, they'll kill him for real." The truck driver shouted urgently. "We are leaving now." Chinedu forced himself to look at Amora despite the pain. "Listen to me," he whispered. His hand trembled against hers. "You promised me freedom." Amora broke down crying. Every instinct inside her refused to leave him behind. But Chinedu's eyes begged her. Not for himself. For her survival. Suddenly police sirens echoed faintly from the highway nearby. Someone at the station had called authorities. Panic spread across Obinna's men instantly. "We need to leave," one shouted. Obinna stared at Amora one final time through the storm. Then at wounded Chinedu. Rage burned inside him like fire. "This is not over," he warned coldly. Moments later, the SUVs disappeared into the night before police arrived. Everything became chaos afterward. Travelers shouting. Police vehicles approaching. Rain crashing endlessly. Amora held Chinedu tightly while tears streamed down her face. "You cannot die," she whispered desperately. Chinedu smiled weakly despite the pain. "I told you." He struggled to breathe. "Some things are worth risking everything for." Then his eyes slowly closed. "Chinedu." And as police lights illuminated the storm-covered highway, Amora no longer knew whether the man she loved was alive or dying in her arms. The storm finally ended just before sunrise. Grey morning light spread slowly across the roadside station while police officers questioned frightened travelers and examined the muddy ground still stained with blood. But Amora noticed none of it. All she could see was Chinedu lying motionless beside her. "Please wake up." Her voice shook violently as she held his face in trembling hands. An ambulance had finally arrived, but every second before it came had felt like an entire lifetime. 2 paramedics rushed toward them with a stretcher. "Move back," one shouted urgently. Amora refused. "No, I'm staying with him." The older paramedic looked at her carefully before softening slightly. "If you want him alive, let us work." Alive. The word itself felt fragile. Dangerously fragile. Amora slowly released Chinedu's hand as they lifted him onto the stretcher. Blood still soaked through his shirt while his skin looked frighteningly pale beneath the early morning light. Ifeoma stood nearby crying silently. Everything had happened too fast. Only hours ago they were dreaming about Lagos. Now they were fighting death. The ambulance door slammed shut. Amora climbed inside immediately beside Chinedu while sirens screamed across the highway toward the nearest city hospital. Every bump in the road made her heart jump. One paramedic pressed hard against Chinedu's wound while another checked his pulse repeatedly. "Pulse weak," he muttered. Amora's chest tightened painfully. "Will he survive?" she whispered. Nobody answered immediately. And that silence terrified her more than anything else. Hours later, the hospital corridor smelled of medicine, bleach, and exhaustion. Doctors rushed in and out of emergency rooms while worried families filled the waiting areas with whispered prayers and anxious faces. Amora sat frozen outside the operating room, staring blankly at the floor. Her dress was still covered in mud and blood. Chinedu's blood. Ifeoma sat beside her silently, holding prayer beads tightly in her hands. Neither of them had spoken much since arriving. Because neither of them knew what to say. Finally, after what felt like forever, the operating room doors opened. A doctor stepped outside removing his gloves tiredly. Amora stood instantly. "How is he?" The doctor exhaled slowly. The bullet missed his heart. Relief crashed through her so suddenly she nearly collapsed. But her heart stopped again. He lost a dangerous amount of blood. Amora's hands trembled. "Will he live?" The doctor studied her carefully before answering. "If he survives the next 24 hours, his chances improve." 24 hours. An entire lifetime of fear hidden inside a single sentence. The doctor continued speaking, but Amora barely heard anything after that. Because one truth echoed louder than everything else. Chinedu was still alive. Barely. But alive. Meanwhile, back in Umuaka village, shocking news had already spread like wildfire. Obinna shot the fisherman. They say the boy is dead. Chief Okeke's daughter escaped. Crowds gathered throughout the marketplace discussing nothing else. For the first time in years, fear around Chief Okeke's family had begun changing into anger. People whispered openly now. Especially after Bobaduru's disappearance. No one had seen the old man since the night inside the forest hut. And deep down, many villagers feared the worst. Inside his mansion, Chief Okeke paced furiously while Obinna sat nearby drinking silently. "You were supposed to scare him," Chief Okeke hissed angrily. Obinna's expression remained cold. "He should not have resisted. You fired guns in public." Obinna finally looked up sharply. And your daughter embarrassed us publicly. The room fell silent. Chief Okeke hated hearing the truth spoken so directly. But Obinna continued anyway. She chose him over wealth, over power, over you. Every word felt like an insult. Chief Okeke clenched his fist tightly. You promised this would end quietly. Obinna stood slowly. It will. Something about his tone made even Chief Okeke uncomfortable. You need to stop now, the older man warned carefully. Police are already involved. Obinna smiled faintly. Then perhaps the boy should disappear before he speaks. Back at the hospital, evening slowly arrived. The orange glow of sunset entered through distant windows while nurses moved quietly through the halls. Amora had not left Chinedu's bedside once. Machines beeped softly around him while bandages covered his wounded shoulder and chest. Seeing him weak like this shattered something inside her. This was the man who carried her through forest. The man who fought powerful people for her. The man willing to risk everything just so she could be free. And now he lay unconscious because of her. Amora lowered her head beside the bed and cried silently. I'm sorry, she whispered brokenly. You didn't deserve this. Suddenly, a weak voice answered. Then stop blaming yourself. Amora's eyes widened instantly. Chinedu. Slowly, painfully, he opened his eyes. Weakness covered his face, but he was awake. Alive. A sob escaped Amora before she grabbed his hand carefully. You scared me. Chinedu managed the faintest smile. You cried too much. She laughed through tears. You almost died. But I didn't. Relief overwhelmed her completely. For several seconds neither of them spoke. They simply looked at each other like two people who had survived the end of the world together. Then Chinedu's expression became serious. Where's Ifeoma? She went to get food. He nodded weakly. Then his eyes shifted toward the hospital door. Did the police speak to you? Amora's smile faded. Yes. And? They asked questions about Obinna. Fear crept across Chinedu's face instantly. He won't stop. Amora knew he was right. Men like Obinna did not accept humiliation easily. Especially not after losing publicly. As if fate itself wanted to confirm their fears. The hospital lights suddenly flickered once. Then twice. A nurse hurried quickly past the room looking nervous. Something felt wrong immediately. Very wrong. Chinedu slowly tried sitting up despite the pain. Amora. Before he could finish. The hallway outside erupted into screaming. Then footsteps. Running. Fast. A terrified nurse shouted somewhere nearby. Someone has a gun. Amora's blood turned cold instantly. And deep down, she already knew exactly who had come to finish the job. The screams in the hallway grew louder. Doctors rushed past the room in panic while frightened patients slammed doors shut one after another. Somewhere nearby, glass shattered violently. Amora froze beside Chinedu's hospital bed. Her entire body turned cold. Someone has a gun. The words echoed repeatedly inside her head. Chinedu struggled painfully to sit upright despite his injuries. Lock the door, he said immediately. Amora rushed toward it with trembling hands and turned the lock just as heavy footsteps thundered through the corridor outside. Voices shouted everywhere. Call security. Get down. Move the patients. The hospital had become chaos. Chinedu clenched his jaw in pain while trying to stand. You shouldn't move, Amora cried. He came for me. Before she could answer, a loud gunshot exploded outside the room. Amora screamed softly. The sound echoed through the hospital floor like thunder. Then silence followed. Terrible silence. Footsteps moved slowly through the hallway afterward. Calm. Confident. Not running. Haunting. Chinedu's face darkened instantly. Obinna. Amora backed away from the door in fear. How did he even find us? He has money, Chinedu replied bitterly. Men like him always find people. The footsteps stopped directly outside their room. Both of them froze. Then came 3 slow knocks against the door. Knock. 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 Amora covered her mouth trembling. Obinna's voice followed calmly from the other side. Amora. The softness in his voice somehow felt more terrifying than shouting. You don't belong with people like him. Neither of them answered. Another knock. I can still forgive you. Chinedu looked toward the nearby window instantly. 3rd floor. Too high to jump safely. No escape. Obinna sighed outside the door. You made me look weak, he said quietly. And now everyone believes they can disrespect me. The doorknob rattled slowly. Locked. For several seconds, silence filled the room again. Then, bang! A bullet tore through the door. Amora screamed and dropped beside the bed while splinters exploded across the floor. Get down! Chinedu shouted. Another shot. Then another. Wood cracked apart violently. Obinna's men were trying to shoot through the door itself. Chinedu grabbed a metal stand painfully and positioned himself in front of Amora despite his condition. You're injured, she cried. I'm still breathing. The damaged door suddenly burst open. 2 armed men rushed inside first. Then Obinna entered behind them slowly wearing a dark coat, his face cold and emotionless. For one horrifying moment, nobody moved. Rain from outside tapped softly against the hospital windows while the hallway behind Obinna remained filled with distant panic. Then Obinna's eyes settled directly on Amora. I gave you chances. Amora stood shakily beside Chinedu. You call this love, she shouted through tears. You're trying to kill him. Obinna's expression hardened instantly. He stole what belongs to me. I am not your property. The room fell silent. Those words struck harder than any insult. Obinna stared at her for several seconds before laughing softly. But this time, even his laugh sounded broken. You would rather suffer with a poor man than live beside power. Amora stepped closer to Chinedu without hesitation. Yes. The answer shattered whatever control remained inside Obinna. His eyes turned dark with rage. One of the armed men raised his weapon toward Chinedu again. Everything slowed. Amora saw the movement instantly. Without thinking, she stepped directly in front of Chinedu. No, she cried. The gunman hesitated. Even Obinna looked shocked. You would die for him, he asked quietly. Amora's tears fell freely now. Yes. The room became completely silent. Because deep down, everyone understood something in that moment. This was real love. Not money. Not control. Not power. Real. And powerful men often hated what they could not control. Obinna lowered his eyes briefly. Then finally whispered. You destroyed everything. Suddenly, police sirens exploded outside the hospital building. Loud. Close. Fast approaching. One of Obinna's men panicked instantly. The police are here. Another cursed nervously. We need to go. Obinna remained still for a moment longer, staring at Amora like someone losing the only thing he ever truly wanted. Then his expression changed completely. Cold again. Dangerous again. He stepped backward slowly toward the doorway. This isn't over, he warned quietly. Then the men disappeared rapidly into the chaotic hallway just seconds before armed police officers stormed the hospital floor. Drop your weapons. More shouting erupted outside. Running footsteps. People screaming again. The sound of pursuit echoed through the building. Inside the room, Amara collapsed emotionally beside Chinedu while her entire body shook uncontrollably. Chinedu held her tightly despite the pain in his shoulder. "It's okay," he whispered. But deep down, both of them knew the truth. Nothing was okay. Not yet. Minutes later, police officers filled the hospital room asking endless questions while security finally locked down the building. A senior officer listened carefully as Amara explained everything about Obinna, the threats, the shooting, and the chase from Umuoka. The officer's expression grew darker with every detail. "This man is dangerous," he muttered. Chinedu gave a weak laugh. "You think?" But even through the tension, something had changed. For the first time, authorities were finally involved seriously. Obinna could no longer hide behind village influence forever. As the officers prepared to leave, one of them suddenly received a phone call. His face changed instantly. "What is it?" another officer asked. The man lowered his phone slowly before looking directly at Amara. "There's been another incident." Fear returned instantly. "What happened?" Amara whispered. The officer hesitated. Then answered carefully. "Your father, Chief Okeke." He paused. "He collapsed at his mansion less than an hour ago." Amara's heart stopped. And suddenly, everything became even more complicated.